Welcome to Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff, where we interview newsmakers, storytellers, and all-around interesting people. Sit back, relax, unless you're driving, and enjoy the show. Here's Jackson.
Hello. I am Jackson Huff. This is Not in a Huff. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, really appreciate it. This week I'm interviewing David Edward. Now, this is a fascinating conversation because he's written a book claiming to have solved maybe one of the biggest mysteries of all time, where the lost city of Atlantis is. His book, it just came out in the past year, and it lays it all out. Here's where Atlantis was. Here's the exact location. Here's Plato explaining it. Here's everything. So this conversation, obviously we talk about exactly where Atlantis was, but we also talk a lot deeper to find that, he wrote this book thinking, okay, I have such definitive proof of this that this is going to change everything. I know where it is, everything makes sense, and I've solved it. We've spent hundreds of years trying to figure this out, many documentaries out there, Disney movies created, Bahamas resorts named after Atlantis, all these things. And I figured it all out, and it wasn't even that hard. But what he's found now is it's an uphill climb, because even though he's super confident that he has found Atlantis, there's a lot of people out there that don't want to believe it. Whether it's because of how it has been created all this time, of this fantasy utopian world, that now everyone looks at this as some, crazy made-up thing that never existed, or whether it's another more sinister idea that, there's been so much money made off of this, what Atlantis is, the resort, the documentaries that have been being made for the last 50 years, that nobody truly wants to find it, because then the mystery's gone and it's just a footnote in history and it's found and that's over with. And so it's been an uphill climb for him to get this accepted. Now, me, of course, this podcast is never going to tell you what to think, and I am not going to tell you either on what you should think. I enjoyed speaking with David. I really do think that what he says makes some sense. I haven't had a chance to read the entirety of the book myself. But I know that, what he talks about today, it makes sense. Whether it's factual, I will let you decide all of that. But I appreciated kind of the talk about the deeper level of things. He is so confident that he has found Atlantis that it's almost not even a conversation on why that's the case and him proving that point. Of course, he talks about what he found, but this conversation deals much more with all of the battle he has had since his supposed discovery. The battle that he's had with the scientific community, National Geographic saying that it's made up, and all this to get any kind of traction in any world other than fringe science and conspiracy theory side of things. So that's not how he sees it. He sees it as this is factual, this is accurate. So we're going to talk about that. In the beginning of this conversation, we're going to talk about his other books, too. He is quite the author. He's written 40-plus books at the time of this conversation. He started writing in 2021, and in just a few years, he wrote 40 books. I know we've talked to other authors, and that's quite the feat, because a lot of them take a year to write one, and he's written 40 in just a few years. So this was filmed a few months ago, so I have no doubt that he's probably written 10 books since then. But everything will be in the show notes on how to find that. But I think you're going to enjoy this, whether you believe him or whether you think it's inaccurate. I don't think that you're going to be able to disagree that this is a fascinating conversation. So without further ado, here is David Edward. I'm here today with David Edward. Mr. Edward, how are you?
I'm doing good, sir. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate it very much. If you would, just introduce yourself.
David Edward, I've written about 45 books. One of the books is on the location of the lost city of Atlantis, which I know we're going to talk a bit about. It's a pretty good book. Just launched a new YouTube channel last night at A History Of. Would really love people checking that out. The first 2 videos up are about Atlantis, and I'll be adding more. In fact, I'm working on one today, so it should be a good channel. Let's see. I'm an old military guy, counterintelligence from the 80s and 90s. I did a lot of cool stuff we can talk about. Written about 45 books, I think I mentioned. I have a doctorate in engineering, like 3 master's degrees. I've been president of a university. I own a geospace company. And I'm sitting here Saturday talking to you.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like you really do too much. You just kind of chill, kick back, huh?
Yeah, kind of chill. Yeah, just chill.
Yeah, the crazy thing is 45 bucks. And, I'm looking at you. You're not 110 years old. 45 books is a lot of books. I've heard you talk to other people. You've written these really quickly too, right?
I published my first book in February of 2021, so a year and a half ago. And look, I have we all struggle with our personalities. My personality is when I do something, I do it. And the first book, Alamosa, it was a supernatural Western, and I'm told, isn't very good. So I could have quit, or I could have done put my head down like the bulldog I am and said, I'm going to keep writing until someone says something good. It took 45 books, but they finally said something good.
Well, that's a good thing. Yeah, I talked to a lot of authors, some at all different levels of popularity. And no matter what, normally the average person says it, I got this one done really fast. It took me 9 months, or this one took me 2 years. So I can't imagine 45 books in that short of time. What's your writing process? How do you write that quickly?
Yes. Well, so for writing, I write about half history and half historical fiction, but fiction, And so for the fiction stuff, what I just have I have a very basic story idea, and then I'm very regimented in my routine. So I'll get up at 6 a.m. and I'll write till 9 a.m, and then I work because gotta eat, like to pay the rent and everything. Mm-hmm. And then at night before I go to bed, I'll read what I wrote in the morning. And I'll make the little corrections, but then that seems to get my subconscious going. So by the time I wake up again, I'm ready to go. And so those 3 hours of writing are very productive. And I'll write between 2,000 and 6,000 words a day is kind of my goal. Now for the history stuff, it's completely different. I outline everything, and then I just start to work on the sections and fill it in, because when you're writing about real things, you have to make sure that there's continuity and that you're actually telling the truth and all of those things. So the outline helps me a lot with that.
Yeah, well, I think the last part is where you write so much, because most authors I talk to, they say they write 500 to 1,000 words a day. So it's the 6,000 words a day is how you're getting them done so quickly.
Yeah. I won the Grammarly Award for like the most words checked or something. It checked something like 1.5 million words in like 4 months. So I'm very proud of that. I didn't get a plaque though. So what are you gonna do?
I wonder too. You said that you write, both fiction and nonfiction. There's a lot of different books, but tell us a little bit about, if somebody sees a David Edward book, what kind of things that they're getting themselves into. Yeah.
So my books are very compact, specific. They're big stories told in very personal, small ways. So like this one, Panama Red, which is the series. This is the big one. It's about 100,000 copies have gone out. And then of the series, of course, more. And the entire book take place over the course of a couple of days, but they're part of a very big story. So I always consider it like the movie Predator, which is a big story, right? Aliens coming to Earth and commandos and all that, but it's but it's told very, very, very small. And I like it because it's very intense, very tight, keeps you moving, and a lot happens in a short period of time.
So are a lot of them kind of part of that same series where you're dealing with the same characters throughout a bunch of books, or is it new people in every book?
I have a mixture. So I have a paranormal. I call it Purgatory Oaths. It's a series where it's the same universe but different character. Well, there's one recurring character, but different stories, different characters every time. I have a series of sci-fi books, which is the same characters throughout, and then I have the thriller series, which is the same characters. So for the ones that make it, not everyone makes it, but yeah. So and then I'm working on 2 books now. I'm working on this. The thriller series ended. It was 6 books, but I'm starting a new series with the same characters. And then I have another book, a Western, a regular pure Western, that's all new characters. So kind of a mix.
Well, that's awesome. And I know at least one of the books, is kind of what we're going to talk about, and that's about Atlantis. So what made you decide, because you write about so many different things, what made you decide this was a topic that you wanted to dive into, because it's definitely a big topic?
Well, Atlantis, I'm a nerd, right? I mean, I put myself in the military because I was too much of a nerd. And I was so nerdy, I didn't even want to go to classes in college or anything. I played video games and stuff. But my nerddom always took me to kind of ancient history. That was the thing I was interested in. I'm not a big UFO, guy, that kind of stuff, contemporary history, modern conspiracies. That's not really my thing. I always like the old history. You mentioned I wasn't too ripe. I'm a little ripe. I'm a little bit of an old guy. So I grew up in the 70s and 80s. And it wasn't like today where there was just endless content. Now if you want to go find something on Atlantis, you can spend 8 hours flipping through YouTube, watching not all great, but not all bad, content. Then it was a big deal if a documentary came out, or if, Jacques Cousteau went somewhere and was looking for something. So I consumed all of that. And I read the book. The first book that kind of really inspired me was The Chariots of the Gods by Eric von Daniken, which was a very famous book. And there wasn't a lot of other stuff when it came out, in that space. So I read through all of that. And then by the time I hit high school, I was kind of done with that. So I'm still a nerd. So I started reading all the classical ancient Greek works, because that's where all this stuff takes you back to Plato and Herodotus and Xenophon and all that stuff. So I'm very well read in that. Then about a year ago, a little more maybe, we mentioned it's a recurring theme. I'm an old guy, so old guys can't sleep. You can sleep now, but it's in your future when it's coming. It'll be tough to sleep. So I was flipping around YouTube, and YouTube handed me up a video on a channel called Bright Insight, and this guy Jimmy Corsetti. And I guess in 2018, he had a series of viral videos where he thought he had found Atlantis. And he's a smart guy. He and I have kind of the same background. He's not deep into the academics, but he was in the military too and stuff. And I thought he made a pretty good case. He couldn't quite close the deal, though. There's a lot of criticism, and he doesn't really have the background to put the nail in it that he actually did find it. But he did, though. So I saw it, and then I saw kind of the backlash to his views. And I'm like, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to see if I can independently verify and bring more of a rigorous methodology to the outline that he had put together. And I did that because I think this is important. I mean, if I could go back to the 7-year-old me and tell him that we actually found Atlantis, it would be a very excited 7-year-old me. So I think this is a big story and a big deal. And so I wanted to jump in, and I decided to.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I always like to just break things down to the lowest level, because I don't expect the listener to know, all these different things. And so we don't always start right in the middle. So I want to know, just for somebody who says Atlantis, what the heck are we even talking about? What is Atlantis?
Atlantis is a lot of things. From a cultural standpoint, it is the idea of a civilization in the past that was more advanced than cavemen dragging their wives around by their hair and eating dino ribs. So that's the cultural piece. That's the societal piece. Beneath that, Atlantis is a fringe history that we can just see. It's about 12,000 years old, which is about as far back as our flashlights seem to go from a civilization standpoint. So so it's tantalizing. We can just see the edges of it. And some people don't want to shine. They don't want to talk about stuff they can't get a whole picture of. So it's right at the edge. It's right at the edge of legitimate science and archaeology and history and all of that. And it's the demarcation line into the fringe, imaginative kind of stuff. That's what Atlantis is.
Gotcha. And why do you think, and you kind of touched on, you even growing up, and it may be part of the answer, but why do you think people have been, I guess, so in the past, so consumed or so obsessed with trying to figure this out? And I guess, why are we still talking about it? You said it was 12,000 years ago. We still haven't necessarily found it.
I think, it's interesting. In today's world, we are all very hyper aware of the information that we get. And over the past number of years, we all have a little switch that is super sensitive to if something doesn't smell right. We're being told something, we're like, I'm not seeing that. I'm seeing something else. And while that's kind of new socially, With Atlantis, that's been going on for 100 years or 1,000 years, which is there's a historical narrative that is that it's all baloney. But then when anyone that starts to look into it, it seems like there's something there. So it triggers that flag that we all have, but it's not political. It's not a dangerous thing to want to know about, and you can kind of dream and project into it. So it's a fun place to have that kind of conflict and do that kind of research, as opposed to today's world where some of the things we all don't agree on is not the funnest place to hang out.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I feel like anytime anyone thinks of Atlantis, I don't know whether it's because of Disney or what, but it's always that there was this sunken underwater city that's that's now somewhere under the ocean. I feel like I listened to you talk to somebody else, and that's not necessarily the case, correct?
Jackson, I would never talk to anyone else but you.
Well, I've heard you talk to other people. My friend Rocky Degata, you talked to.
Okay, all right, you caught me. So look, Atlantis has been there's a huge problem with this topic, which is Atlantis has been beaten to death because it can be anything, and people have used it as anything to make other points for all kinds of reasons, probably every reason you can imagine. We've all kind of heard it described as everything. So the problem is, if something can be everything, can it ever just be something? Can it ever just be anything? I always kind of say, I'm as I jumped into this, I had no idea what I would find, but I'm kind of like the Grinch who stole Christmas, which is we're interested and we keep looking at Atlantis, and it's like those Christmas presents under the tree, and they're pretty wrapping paper, and some of the boxes are pretty big, and they got bows on it, and we're staring at them, and we're just dreaming about what's inside, because it's gonna be everything. It's everything we ever wanted that's inside of it. Then, of course, we open it on Christmas Day, and it's tube socks and undershirts, which is great. We gotta wear socks, and we need an undershirt and all of that. But it wasn't the reality of it wasn't as exciting as what we dreamt about when we were thinking about it. So Atlantis is kind of the same way. I tell people, it's not UFOs or nuclear submarines or death ray power crystals. There is no like society that came out of it. There's no secret anything. It was just a place. It was just a place. We like to project the idea of advanced onto this place. And everything, by the way, just to back up a little bit, everything I say comes from Plato. Plato was a Greek philosopher. He wouldn't have seen himself as a philosopher, but he lived between like 450 and 340, something like that, BCE, and that's when he kind of wrote. So when anything I assert, I'm asserting from him. That's my foundation of whatever. But what he says the Atlanteans were good at, he says they were very good at agriculture, and we can get into as much of this as you want. The time period we're talking about is like 9600 BCE, which is like 11,622 years ago, which is an amazing date. That's the date he gives us, but it's a very it's almost a magical date, because that's the date of the end of the last ice age, what they call the Younger Dryas, and we know there were cataclysms and stuff going on back then. But he tells us they were very good at agriculture, and they were very good at organizing themselves. He liked how they had kind of put their governmental structure together. So that's kind of what he wrote about in his two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias.
Gotcha. So I just wonder too, we just mentioned one thing. Well, first of all, I don't know that you necessarily said, is it,
sorry.
Was it under the ocean or was it not?
Okay. So are you asking me where it is?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. All right. So there is a structure in West Africa in a country called Mauritania called the Rishat structure. Stupid name. I think it's a geological name. It's also called sometimes the Eye of the Sahara. The Eye of the Sahara, it's a huge, it's like almost 10 or 12 miles across. And the first thing you notice when you look at it, and if anyone is watching this, you can just type in Rishat, Richhat, that one word into Google, and then go to the images, and you'll see hundreds of images of this thing. And the first thing you'll notice is it looks like Atlantis. So the one thing we all tend to know about Atlantis is there's a bunch of rings. There's rings of land and water. That's like the classic look. And when you look at this Rishat structure, it's exactly what it looks like. I mean, it looks like it. It meets that definition perfectly. And it is in, I mentioned it, right now it's in the Western Sahara Desert, which is not anywhere close to being under the ocean, right? I mean, the desert. But with this time period we're talking about, 9600 BCE, the Western Sahara was actually what they call the Green Sahara. So it was very green and lush, and it was a wonderful place to live. And when you start to put it all together, and we know there were people there, this was during the Neolithic time. In fact, we're hip deep in what they call the pre-pottery Neolithic. And that all that means is we're in the New Stone Age. That's what Neo means, new. Lithic Stone Age, but we're pre-pottery. So kind of we're in that niche between, and all pottery is, by the way, is we figured out if you cook dirt, it holds its form, right? You cook mud. But that's an invention, so that's still in front of us. But so we're in the pre-pottery Neolithic, we're in a lush green environment. We know there are people there. And you look at the geography, it would have been in the middle of a lake with about 10 miles on either side, and then a river that flowed from this structure down to the ocean, a very long river, like 345 miles, which is interesting because people say, well, I don't like that. I want Atlantis to be in the middle of the ocean, or I want it to be somewhere. This is where you start to dig into Plato, and we can get into some of the specifics, but he gives us all kinds of markers. And one of the most interesting markers he gives us is I read it sometimes. I'll read it to you because it helps triangulate this location. But this is something in Plato. It's in the dialogue called Critias that has been ignored by people looking for Atlantis, as far as I know, for thousands of years, because it's an inconvenient saying. Here's what it says. He says, the country immediately about and surrounding the city was a level plain, itself surrounded by mountains, which descended towards the sea. It was smooth and even and of an oblong shape, extending in the one direction 3,000 stadia. So he's giving us he's explaining the land to us with the city as the marker, and then we have a gently sloping plain of 3,000 stadia to the sea. All right, well, let's unpack that. So first off, what's a stadia? Right? What does that mean? It turns out, and this is the Alexandrian measure because that's the time period that Plato is writing in. A stadia is 607 feet. And this well-established fact. Okay, so if you multiply 3,000 times 607, you get some big number, and then you divide it by 5,280, which is a mile, and you get 345. So then you go look at the Rishat structure, and you look at where the coast is, and you go to Google Earth, and anyone listening, I encourage you to do it, and you draw a line from the front of the Rishat structure to where the ocean is, and guess how far it is? How far do you think it is? 345 miles.
Yeah,
so
gotcha.
it's what he said. And we have there's like 20 markers like that kind of line this thing up. So when you start to look at what he said, and then you start to look at the actual established history, the Green Sahara, all that stuff I talked about, and you start to look at what they found of people in the place, which clearly Neolithic people lived here. And then you start to realize, well, 10, 12,000 years ago, these people are just like us. This isn't some not evolved group of apes or anything. These are people exactly like you and me, maybe a little shorter. It's the obvious place to live. I mean, if you're walking around and you're looking at this thing, you'd be an idiot to walk by it. And then and it's well protected. And you start to read what Plato wrote about their agricultural prowess and their ability to organize themselves. That's exactly what we're seeing. This time period, 9600 BCE, we're hip deep in what they call the Neolithic Renaissance or Neolithic Revolution. So this is where in 10,000 BCE, so it's 400 years before, we start to see agriculture, and we start to see the transition from hunter-gatherers, and we start to see communities. We start to see all those things. So why wouldn't we see those things here in Africa, which is where we're told we all came from anyway? Why wouldn't that be one of the first places? So it all lines up, is my point. And there's tons of data points, but it just makes logical sense once you actually read what we know about it versus just listening to the speculation and what other people say about it.
Yeah. And do you think that having all of this speculation and all of this fantasy and all of the craziness that people have made it because they're trying to make it a more interesting, magical thing has hurt actually being able to find the real thing? Because I feel like with all of the fantasy around it, those who are trying to look for it, like you, people just think, oh, well, they're chasing rainbows.
Yeah, I mean, RESPECT, right? Respect. Historically, Atlantis, the story of the history, has lost the respect of both what we would call the academic community and fringe researchers. Like me, I'm a fringe. I mean, that's what I am. I look for inconsistencies. And because people have historically haven't respected it, they've abused it. which is what you're saying. And because they've abused it so much, all of us, we think whatever we hear is just an anecdote and it's not conclusive. We're just used to that in this space because the setup, look, the classic setup of those shows I started watching in the 70s and still to today. Any you go watch any show on this, any documentary, the setup's going to be the first half. They fill you through the history. They convince you they know what's going on. They show you the beautiful pictures of all the islands and the Greek, the water and good looking people scuba diving and the whole. And you're like, I'm in, I believe. And then the second half, they kind of hem and haw and look at a couple places, and then by the end they go, more research is required, and we don't know. And that's happened now to all of us hundreds of times on this topic. Even if we don't know anything about it, we've sat through it or we've seen the movies where all that stuff. So now if someone comes along who's claiming it's real, it sounds exactly like all the other stuff because they all use the same words. So it's very hard, to get through the noise. I did it with the book is basically a proof. So if anyone reads the book, it's very definitive and very scientific in how it goes through the data, presents it, and proves it. And that's why I'm starting the new YouTube channel too, because I'm putting these in videos because people seem to consume 5 to 10 minute videos a lot more readily than they read books anymore, if that makes sense, especially for stuff like this.
Yeah. And I wonder if it's just because of marketing and because what Atlantis has become, which is like this underwater paradise or whatever. How did we're talking about it being in Africa, to the American world, how did it move to the Bahamas? The Battle for Atlantis is a basketball tournament. There's a big hotel there called Atlantis. So how did that all happen?
That's just brilliant marketing on their part, right?
Yeah.
See, that's the thing. Atlantis can be anything, and it's a known word. So if it can be anything, then people can use it, and they don't respect it.
Yeah.
So if you don't respect it, it can be anything, but it's got name recognition, it's got a brand. Why wouldn't you do whatever you want with it? Yeah. Which is exactly what happened there. And then in the Bahamas, you've got the Bimini Road, which a lot of people like. And I'd say in the 60s and 70s, it was viewed as the find of the century. That has fizzled. It's now probably just, sandstone rocks or something. No one knows. But for a long time, that was the center of the current Atlantis, hoopla. And that's when whoever the marketers were plopped the hotel down in the 90s, which is brilliant. And look, the people still go there. I mean, it's a success. So good for them. I mean, they didn't respect Atlantis and used its name, but they've had a lot of success with it. So it's fine.
That sounds your face and your smirk makes it seem a little salty that they didn't respect it, but we can move from that.
Yeah, well, that's just me. My frustration is the work that I've done to figure all this out, and I've figured out so much more than I've been able to get out yet. It wasn't hard work. I'm not overly insightful. I'm a smart guy. I've got the military experience, so I was trained in what they call battlefield counterintelligence. So I've been trained to look at things and be able to put pieces together. But there's been thousands and thousands of people that have had that same job, and it's not a unique skill set just to that job. But it wasn't that hard to figure this out. So now I do get frustrated. So I'll go into a conversation and someone will say, Atlantis, it's all bullshit because it's an oral tradition, and I cringe because the lightest amount of effort in reading of the actual source material, the primary material, you don't have to read, 50 lines in. And you see that's actually not the case. The chain of custody is provided. This all came from the hieroglyphics on a wall in a town called Sais, which is in the Nile Delta. And it was a temple of Neith, which was the Egyptian creator goddess. She's the mother of Ra. She's the mother of the entire Egyptian pantheon. Her worship dates back to 6000 BCE, but it's all there. We know all this stuff. So a lot of the arguments I have to walk into is they're not even real arguments. I have to wade through opinions and things people have heard and this natural bias to not believing that the topic is real. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult. And it can be, I've now been doing it for about a year. I'm noticing it more. I don't want to use the word frustrated yet because that's not at all. I love talking about this, but now I've had to walk into undoing, baloney conversations. And now every time I do it, I now have to find the energy in me to do it, where before I was just jumping right in, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I don't have to. You don't have to build up that energy right now because I want to kind of play devil's advocate or kind
No,
of
please do.
challenge
I love it.
challenge
Yep.
you a bit because
Do it.
what I wonder is, people listening, they're going to think, okay, he just told us that this is super easy. It didn't take him long to figure it out, and then you also told us that there's all these documentaries that have said, it's inconclusive. People have dumped so much money into this and trying to figure it out. If it was that easy, why did it take till 2022 and David Edward to come around to figure it all out?
Yeah, because if you solve it, you can't build a franchise off of it. You can't write 10 books and have 3 series and get the next Discovery Channel travel vacation where they're going to, pay you $250,000 to go scuba diving in the Greek islands. All that's gone if you solve it. I'm lucky. I'm a recluse. I don't want to leave my room. So I don't want to, I'm not trying to get money from anybody. I think it's important that it gets solved. I mean, to me, I'm a true believer. So I think if all the engines and all the research and all the people that look at history and write the books and do all the things, if they accepted this timeline, which I think is easy to confirm, then what can we discover? Now, when we look at stuff, we can look at it for real. We don't have to pretend or ignore, the inconsistencies and the oddities and stuff. We have a narrative and we have a framework to understand them for real, which I think would be great. But that's the precipice we stand upon right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that's a big, that would be a big conspiracy theory to dive into, that all of these people are just wanting to keep it unsolved, to keep it going. But I understand that. What do you think that all these people that have been kind of researching it in the past, which it may just be that they didn't want to solve it based on what you're saying, but what do you think that the main thing that they have gotten wrong in figuring it out that you've gotten right?
I went into this and what I said is there is no answer where we can dismiss any relevant piece of the 2 Platonic dialogues that discuss this. So I didn't cherry pick from the dialogues. And I think that happens a lot. The other thing is I decided that I didn't care what anyone had said because we're dealing with a very unique situation here. We have what they call a primary source. And that's this guy Plato, the Greek philosopher. Anything else, although there is anecdotal supporting sources, but they only work to support Plato. They don't work on their own. Anything that's not him or one of those supporting documents is baloney. It doesn't matter. It's written by somebody else who's no smarter or dumber than me or anyone else looking at it. So I pushed all that aside. And when you do all that, because there's so much noise, and I decided I wasn't going to worry about the social political aspect of it. Because people ask me, what were the Atlanteans like? I don't know. I mean, that's not my gig. My gig is, where were they real? When were they? And where were they? And because that is the information that Plato gives us. He spends a lot of time doing it. I think he thought it was important. So what do they get wrong? I think they do it as a commercial enterprise more. Look, here's the best example. Have you ever heard of Graham Hancock? Do you know who he is?
No.
No, he invented this alternate history space. Arguably, he just had a new documentary series coming on Netflix like 2 days ago or something. So he's having a resurgence in this space, and he got me into this space on some level. In 1995, he wrote this book called Fingerprints of the Gods, where he lays out his case for that we're a civilization with amnesia, and a lot more was going on in the past than we know. But even he has become commercialized. He was my hero. Now he frustrates me. His first major book was called The Sign and the Seal. Came out before he got famous, before this Fingerprints of the Gods. And it's like a huge book, like that thick, teeny tiny type. But what he did is he did exactly what I did with Atlantis. He said, I'm going to find the lost Ark of the Covenant. I think it's findable. I think I can deduce it. And then he basically wrote the book as a travelogue showing all of his research. And at the end of the book, he says, here it is. It's in the Primary of Zion in Ethiopia. And he has the book ends with a picture of him outside the gate, basically. I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's what I want to do. So that's what I've done with Atlantis. Now his other books, he's written like 20 or 30 books, and he's sold probably millions and millions of them. He now has a book series, so it's a narrative. So he's not solving things. He's bringing attention to all of the mysteries and inconsistencies. So he's kind of become commercialized, which I think is where this takes you. But I'd rather solve it than continually talk about it.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean you're very confident in what your book shows and solving it. So with that said, do you think that this resolution is going to become mainstream? Because I mean when I research about it, I mean National Geographic says that it was created by Plato as a folk tale. There's a lot of the big guns are not necessarily on this side. So do you think eventually people are going to come around and understand it more, or is it just going to be a battle that you're going to be expelling breath on forever?
I think it's an interesting question, and I ask myself that question a lot. And I think the answer has to come hand in hand with another question, which is Atlantis so broken that even if we found the big sign that says Atlantis was here, right, with Poseidon doing this, would that be accepted? And I don't know. I don't know. What I've decided to do is to spend the next year on these YouTube documentary videos presenting the entire case and doing all the work for these academics, right? If National Geographic has their view of it, I'm going to do the work for them. I'll put it all out there, and then they can look at it. And I think at some point, I even say this in the video I just did last night. At some point, if the data is out there and everyone can understand it and everyone can see it, I think it becomes easier to accept it than to all of a sudden now be. What I want to do is I want to have the people that are naysayers, have them become the fringe researchers, right? Right now, I'm the fringe researcher. I'm saying I know where Atlantis is, and it was like, whatever, might be interesting, but no. And National Geographic says it was made up. Okay, well, I want it to be so that National Geographic has a harder time defending that it was made up than I do that I found it. And I'm going to try that for the next year. Now, a year's not that long, but I don't know. I honestly don't know. It's a brilliant question. It shows a lot of insight on your part, and I think we'll see. That's the battle, right? We're fighting the battle right now, and we'll just have to see how the war goes.
We will, yeah, and you're really placing a lot into this book. So I wonder, too. You just talked about how people like to make things easy and digestible. How does your book read? Somebody that's picking it up, they listen to this, and they're like, I don't exactly know what's going on, but I want to hear more about it. Does it read in a really digestible way, or do you need a history degree to figure it all out?
A little bit of neither.
Okay.
So the book is a proof. I didn't try and write a documentary, or I didn't write it necessarily to entertain. So it's a proof, but it's very accessible. So it lays everything out in detail at a decent pace. So it starts with, and it just follows the scientific method. It says, do we have a question? Yes, we have a question. Was Atlantis real? Well, what is the current view of that? What data can we collect? When we analyze that data, what happens? And then we have a conclusion. And the book just walks you through that. And then at the end, I did an updated chapter where there were like 5 criticisms that came of the theory. So I addressed each of the 5 criticisms at the end. And I haven't received any new criticisms. I haven't received additional criticisms. I continue to receive the same ones that I addressed in the back of the book. But so it's very accessible. It's a very easy read. The feedback I've gotten, every single person that's read it, even those that hate it and have gotten mad at me, agree that the book does make its case, and it does prove within the context of the data we have that this location matches Plato to like 99.3%. We can say just because it matches, it's not Atlantis, but the book does prove it matches. And you can read the reviews. I've gotten everything from it's a scam, it's bullshit, but he's right, to this is like Atlantis for Dummies. I loved it. I read it 3 times, and all that. But all criticism, all critiques end with, I read it, and that's it.
Well, that's a high criticism then. I think that's a good thing to have if people are, even the people that don't like it kind of understand it. So I wonder too, because how is this going to be figured out, or how are people going to understand it? Where is it something that we're just going to, I guess, have to understand academically, or is there something tangible that's ever going to happen? Because it's so long ago. That's pretty deep down there. Is there anything that can actually ever be tangibly found, or is that not something that's going to happen?
No, and we have found stuff. I mean, we found Stone Age tools. They're not atypical is part of the challenge.
Right.
We've also found a guy I work with, David Stig Hansen, He was just there in Mauritania last week. He just came back last week. He was there for the whole month of October. And we have found agricultural deposits that look like they date to this time period that would not be expected to be found, and they seem to be under the sand. So we think that's interesting. We've done the topographic analysis, and we know we have 2 locations where we think it'd be interesting to dig. But here's the real challenge, Jackson. If I'm right, then Atlantis is boring. This is the whole problem. Then, you know what, if I'm right, then it becomes almost a footnote in history along with Göbekli Tepe and some of the other things that we found. And it just more firmly establishes that 9600 wall as a time where something happened. So it's, you know, it's almost a contradiction. If it only remains interesting as long as it's not true.
Well, that's and that is a tough wall to climb then, because a lot of people just rather be entertained than be. I mean, that's a it's a way deeper topic, but I think in the world, a lot of people just rather be entertained than really understand. I think that's the problem we face. So
I've had people tell me, they say, look, I don't have very much. I have this. Why are you trying to take it away from me? And I'm like, I'm just trying to figure out what happened. You know, I'm sorry. I don't know. But, you know, yeah, I mean, I always that I've had people that very, very well-known people in this space contact me very angrily because they don't want answers here. They want the mystery to keep going. Just like the TV show Ancient Aliens, is like in its 24th season or something. If aliens ever came down, the show would be ruined, you know? So they don't want to find them. They just want to talk about them. So it's just interesting.
I think that's funny what you said. I don't have very much. Why are you trying to take this away from me? Are there people that just chill with a Atlantis pillow, or what? I don't know. What do you mean? Are people clinging on to it so bad? I guess I don't know.
Look, I was on Coast to Coast AM like a month and a half ago with this, which is a big, and they took live callers. Mm-hmm. And one of the people that called in said that they had done a life regression, or I don't know, and that they were the assistant scientist in Atlantis when the whole thing fell apart, and they were working on the death ray power crystal, and they remember yelling to the lead scientist that it was becoming unstable and there was a problem, but they didn't ignore him, and then the whole thing blew up, and that's what destroyed Atlantis. So my answer is, okay, all I'm going to do is tell you where you were when you were living there. I don't know what happened. But you know, but you know, that kind of stuff. And I want to be respectful because we're dealing with real passion and real beliefs, you know, whether I believe it or not doesn't have anything to do with it. So yeah, you just have to, and I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared for any of that. When I jumped into this, it was purely analytical exercise out of curiosity. And I also I was so naive. I can't even describe how naive I was. I just assumed when I actually wrote it all down, so it was kind of airtight, that would be the end of it, not the beginning of it. But what I find is a lot of the criticisms that I get are addressed in the book, but people don't read the books. You know, we deal in this world of hearsay. And yeah, anyway, so whatever your question was, that was my answer.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting where this has kind of went, because I didn't realize that most of the issue is just going to be getting people to understand what you're saying, and people kind of pushing back, which makes sense. And I think that the huge thing and why people, and we kind of talked about earlier, I feel like the reason why it's taken so unseriously is exactly what you just mentioned, that people have this mindset that it's this utopian, super advanced society, death ray power crystal, that all starts screaming, okay, everything about Atlantis is just cuckoo stuff.
No, that
yeah. So I mean, I want people to check out the book. There's not a ton more that really can be said on the outside of it until people check out the book. So how can people find it?
The publisher website is frequency99.com. The 2 9s are numbers. Obviously, I just mentioned I've now plugged my new channel that I just launched last night 3 times, at A History Of. And I'm putting out videos where I'm starting to meticulously work through this. And then, of course, the book is on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all of the typical retailers.
Yeah. Is Frequency 99 where everyone can find your 7,000 other books?
It's where they can find my 7,000 other books and all that stuff. Yes, it's I'm pretty well insulated, so you can't quite get to me, but you can get to my publicist through the website.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would start at frequency99.com. That's the bee's knees.
I got you. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. I really appreciate it.
Jackson, look, I appreciate the questions too and your insight. You asked some very intelligent questions that showed you're not just engaged but thoughtful, and that you understand some of this stuff.
Well, good. Thank you. So that was David Edward. What a fascinating guy. Really appreciate his compliments at the end. I wanted to do this, this story justice for sure. I don't know a ton about Atlantis. I think that's evident in our conversation. But from what I do know, I think what he's saying makes some sense. And I also look at it from both perspectives, and I know that given that I've never wrapped myself up with very much of any of it, the quote-unquote factual side or the conspiracy side, maybe that's why I can just look at this from a fresh lens and think, hey, what he's saying makes sense. I don't know the other side. I don't know what people say that maybe discredits what he's saying, if that's even possible. So yeah, I don't know. If you're listening to this and you're I guess big into Atlantis, you can let me know what you think here. But I really appreciated David's time. I'm eager to check out more of that book and just learn more. I think whether I agree or whether you agree on what he's saying, it never hurts just to learn more perspective, and definitely one that he feels is so definitive on a topic that really has eluded us for hundreds of years. It's something that people have been searching for a long time and not been successful with it. So maybe he was. So yeah, I put the link to his books. Because remember, there's a lot of different ones, so maybe you're listening to this and like, the Atlanta stuff, interesting, but I don't want to read a whole book about it. But I am interested in those other science fiction books or those Western books. I'll put a link to the show notes, a link in the show notes to him and to all those books, and whatever way to connect with him in that frequency 99. If this is your first time listening, thanks so much for being here. Check out some other podcast episodes, because we've had a lot of amazing people on. Go give us a 5-star review on Apple and on Spotify. Leave a written review on Apple. Even more amazing. Follow us on Instagram, Not Enough Podcast, JacksonF.com, Not Enough Podcast on Facebook. But we're everywhere. Appreciate you being here. We'll catch you next week. Take it away, Chris.
This has been Not in a Huff with Jackson Huff. Thank you for listening. Be sure to join us next time, where we will interview another amazing guest who is sure to make you laugh or make you think. Or, hey, maybe even both. But until then, keep being awesome.